Alright, so some of you have been asking how to solve this. So the first thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to go ahead and take the factors of your constant, and you're going to want to divide it by the factors of your leading coefficient. So the factors of my constant in this case is plus or minus 1, plus or minus 8, plus or minus 2, plus or minus 4. See, all I did was I took the factors of 8, and I'm going to divide it by the factors of 2. So all I have is plus or minus 1 and plus or minus 2. So all my possible rational real zeros are going to be in this equation right here. So anything divided by 1 is just going to be itself. So I have plus or minus 1 plus or minus 8 plus or minus 2 plus or minus 4. And, well, 4 divided by 2 is just 2, and I already have that here. 2 divided by 2 is just 1, and I have that here. 8 divided by 2 is just 4, and I have that here. And 1 divided by 2 is 1/2, and I don't have that there yet, so I'm going to go ahead and add plus or minus 1/2. So these are all my possible rational real zeros that are going to come out of this equation. And because it is to the 4th power, that does mean that I'm going to have 4 different zeros. So I have 4 different zeros here. I also want you guys to notice that we are going to have to divide twice in this polynomial. So in this particular one, we're going to have to divide twice. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and find my first one. Now, you can plug each one of these in, positive 1 and negative 1, plug it in there. Positive 8, negative 8, plug it in there. Positive 2, plug it in. Negative 2, plug it in. And see which one gives you 0, right? You can do that. Or you can go to your calculator and just graph it. So if I turn on my calculator and I go ahead and graph it, let me clear that. And I just graph 2x to the 4th power minus 7x to the 3rd power minus 8x to the 2nd power plus 14x plus 8. And I go ahead and graph it. I can see that it shows me, I myself somewhere. Oh, I see where I messed up. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this. Okay, everything else should be correct. All right, there we go. So we see that we get a few zeros. I'm going to go ahead and move this over. So we see that we get a few zeros. We get a 0 right there, which is not a rational number. It's not a number that we can go ahead and represent as a fraction. We get, that looks like 1/2. That looks like another irrational number. And that looks like 4. So you see how I got a positive 4, which is this number right here, and I got a negative 1/2. So these are my two zeros that I'm going to go ahead and say that those are zeros. So right there, I already have half my problem. So x is equal to positive 4, and x is equal to negative 1/2. But I already have half my zeros just by graphing, just by plugging them in. Now, the part that I think confuses a lot of you is going to be what you do with these zeros once you have them. And I noticed that on a lot of your quizzes that you didn't know where to go from here. And the next step is going to be to go ahead and either use synthetic division or long division to go ahead and simplify this problem now that you have those zeros. So for example, if I wanted to use synthetic division, I can definitely do long division by dividing this by x minus 4 and x plus 1/2. Or I can use synthetic division and divide by that number. So I'm going to go ahead and use synthetic division just because it's a shorter way to do it. So I'm going to first off divide by 4. So synthetic division, I just put in all the leading coefficients. So I have 2, negative 7, negative 8, positive 14, and 8. And always, 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 I bring this first number down. So that's a 2 right there. So I have 2 times 4 is going to give me an 8. And when I add these two together, this gives me positive 1. So I have 1 times 4, which gives me positive 4. When I add these two together, this gives me negative 4. Sorry. When I go ahead and multiply these two together. 4 times negative 4 gives me negative 16. When I add these two together, this gives me a negative 2. And 4 times negative 2 gives me negative 8. And so this right here, 8 and a negative 8 cancel out. That gives me 0. So this is my remainder. And it's good that I don't have remainders. This means that it's definitely a factor. So this is, because I was using x to the 4th power, this is going to be 2x to the 3rd power plus 1x minus, plus 1x squared, my bad, minus 4x minus 2. And so that's my new equation, 2x to the 3rd power plus x squared minus 4x minus 2, right? And so, okay, I already divided by this 0. Let's check that one off. Now, I go ahead and divide by this 0 as well. So, once again, I can use synthetic division. I just put negative 1/2 up in here, and I put in the leading coefficients, so 2 and a 1 and a negative 4 and a negative 2. And I always bring that first number down. 2 times negative 1/2. Well, what's half of 2? Well, that's just 1. And then negative times a positive gives me negative, so I have a negative 1. And so negative 1 plus a positive 1 gives me a 0. And 0 times anything is just 0. So negative 4 plus 0 gives me negative 4. And then negative times a negative gives me positive. So I know I'm going to have a positive answer. And then what's half of 4? Well, that's just 2. So I have a positive 2. Negative 2 plus positive 2 just gives me a 0. So this is my remainder, right? And so I go ahead and say, okay, so this is going to be my, since I was an x third, now I bring down one exponent. So x to the 2nd power, this is plus 0x minus 4. So this is my new equation. So just 2x squared minus 4. And this is equal to 0. And from here, I can just go ahead and solve. Or if you really didn't know where to go, or if you had an equation that you weren't sure and you actually had a number there instead of a 0, well, then you would just say, okay, so my a is going to be 2, my b is going to be 0, and my c is going to be negative 4. And then I would just go ahead and plug it into my quadratic formula, which is going to be negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac, all divided by 2 times a. And if you really want me to work it out, I can go ahead and do that for you all. So negative b squared, that's, negative b is just 0. So 0 plus or minus the square root of b squared, that's just, well, b squared is just 0 squared, so that's 0. And then minus 4ac. So 4ac, 4 times 2, so, sorry, my bad, times 4 times 2 times, my c is negative 4, there. And I'm going to divide all this by 2 times a, so 2 times 2. And so all this gives me is 4 times 2, or negative 4 times 2, that's 8 times 4. So 8 times 4 is 32, and I divide it by the square root of 2. So I have square root of 32 divided by 4. And so this just goes to how you simplify squares, right? Radicals. So I can go ahead and separate this out into perfect squares. Square root of 32 is the same thing as saying the square root of 16 times 2, right? Because 16 is a perfect square, and we know this is divided by 4. So we go ahead and separate that out into the square root of 16 times the square root of 2 divided by 4. What's the square root of 16? Well, that's just 4. So we have 4 divided by 4 times the square root of 2. And 4 over 4 is just 1, so we have 1 times the square root of 2. So it's plus or minus the square root of 2. So we have plus the positive square root of 2, and then minus the square root of 2. And so that's it.